Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Greyhorn Pagans Circus. Grab your popcorn and loosen up that smile, cause here come the clowns with Steinfox, J. Ash Odinson, and Paul Stobbs.
Welcome all and welcome back on the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. It is good to have you all back here. Today will be quite a special episode. It's not something that we really have discussed before. I know other podcasters have discussed it before. I know that NY Patriot from Occult Rejects has done stuff on this, but not like we are about to now. My guest for today is goes by Understanding Conspiracy. Sorry, I forgot your name.
It's
Sorry,
okay.
And
it's
he quite literally wrote the book on how and why the Nephilim looked like clowns. Some very crazy theory that I have heard about before, but never really dove into it. So thank you very much for coming on. Introduce yourself to the people who may not know you yet, who have been living under a rock lately.
Certainly. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I run a YouTube channel called Understanding Conspiracy. And in 2016, I started a series, which is now 44 episodes in, called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. And it was the kind of the amalgamation of a lot of years of research into the occult, psychedelic exploration, coming to faith in the Christian belief system and the history of the Watchers and getting into all that kind of stuff, you know. And as an artist by degree, I got my degree in fine art from Lincoln University in 2014. I've always been a creative mind and a creative thinker and a visual person. And through all my research into the Nephilim, I was always confronted with these images of really hand-looking, enormous, hench, buff men with long brown hair and loincloths, like something out of Conan the Barbarian, you know, every time the Nephilim were talked about. And I'm like looking at these things and I'm thinking that does not look like the hybrid between a fiery flying serpent and the daughters of Cain. They would not look like that. You know, they would have looked like monsters. And that kind of got my creative brain juices flowing in a way. And I had quite a lot of experiences up into 2016, which have kind of given me glimpses into the spiritual realms, encounters with these demonic entities, you know, the Jesters and the DMT realm, things like this, which we can get into the details. But to summarize quickly, when 2016 came along and the creepy clown sightings started to happen kind of in the Western Hemisphere across all countries, from England to Europe all the way to America, you would find every single small news station in every suburb everywhere was discussing creepy clowns appearing on street corners, scaring children, just standing menacingly, you know, a mass hysteria type of event. And what caught my attention more than anything is that the media was even talking about this on such a mass scale. And I already had enough knowledge by that point in the occult and their practices to know that if something's on that box in the corner of my room, then they want me seeing it. The clown means something to these people. It's a symbol for something. And neurons began to fire. Connections were very quickly made. And I've looked into Nephilim and clowns. Is there something here? Because I knew enough about that demons were the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. They're trapped on the earth in like a spirit realm of some kind. People encounter Jesters when they take DMT. So therefore, are they encountering the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim? Are the Nephilim connected in some way to clowns and jesters? And that media event kind of made me just roll with it. And a preliminary search came up with nothing. No one's ever really thought about it, connected the two together. And there was one video from a guy called The Epic Conspiracy who was just making a mockumentary video to take the piss out of conspiracy theorists. He was having a laugh at us, saying how stupid these people are believing in giants, you know. But he did it in like a History Channel style, and he was talking about the Nephilim. He says the Nephilim have white skin and red hair. There's only one explanation: they're interdimensional killer clowns from out of space, you know. And he showed the 80s image and all this type of thing. But he was making fun of us, you know. He was having a laugh at us. But as soon as I heard him say that, I was like, you have no idea. And I kind of kept rolling with it, and like I said, 8 years later, I have this series, and it just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And yeah, we'll get into it today. But there you go.
I have a question. Should we start trash talking the Smithsonian right now, or should we just build all the way up to that at the end? Because that's always where it ends up.
Yeah, well, in the book I've written, which just got published at the start of the year, The Nephilim-clowns, I do an entire chapter on the skeletons of North America and all the newspaper clippings from the 1800s and the evidence of all of that. What chapter is it? I can't remember the chapter it's in. I think it's in Biblically Accurate Nephilim, Modern Encounters, chapter 13 is here. And it's just dedicated to breaking down how the Smithsonian quite literally buried and covered up and destroyed all of these bones that were being uncovered all throughout the 1800s, quite consistently as well, you know. So
the Eastern Mounds Coalition, or the Eastern, there was specifically one guy set over the eastern part of the country. It's like everything that happened there. Mm-hmm. He was not a diffusionist, he was an isolationist. So when his theories won out, it just bashed every other piece of evidence that came in after that proved that basically cultures all talked about the same thing, and it was for a reason, not just because they all imagined the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, I'm trying to get his name here. I think his name was Alice Herlisha. I can't pronounce it. It's got a lot of accents on his name. But he was involved in the eugenics movement. He was a pre-Nazism philosophy funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. He was an absolute fiend. He was pushing, basically, like you said, the giant stuff fits in the narrative of evolution, basically. And he was staunchly for, because obviously evolution promotes eugenics. Without eugenics, evolution, it just doesn't work. So it's he kind of needs to crush that idea. And he did, when he took over, he did go on kind of a rampage of just completely denigrating, threatening, destroying anybody who even talked about the giant skeletons that were just being uncovered en masse all throughout North America during that time period. And it's interesting because you look into it, all these accounts that I've got here written in the book, and they're by people of really high reputable account. These people, these archaeologists, weren't just random nobodies discovering these skeletons and talking about them. At the time, they were very well respected in their field. They weren't like conspiracy theorist crazies.
No, these are like University of Colorado scientists and archaeologists. Yeah, that's why I said, should we just start with the Smithsonian, or are we going to wind up there?
Well, it's interesting because obviously you have North American encounters throughout history with the mound builders, and also just giant tribes in general. It seems like America was the land of giants at some nebulous point in the past. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when or how recent some of these oral tradition stories are coming out of, let's say, the Paiute Indians of the North American plains who dealt with the city car, and they obviously were constantly in skirmishes with these pale-skinned, tall, big teeth, cannibalistic redhead giants that just kept eating and stealing their women and children. It was just so eventually they stood up to them and said no more, and literally just genocided the entire race of giants and smoked them out in a cave, called Lovelock Cave. And lo and behold, you get these guano miners looking for mining for bat feces, and they uncover in this cave artifacts, skeletons, all sorts of things that corroborate the story that these Indian tribes have been talking about for a long time. The evidence was there. And funnily enough, I think the local Freemason lodge took the bones, requested the bones, and took them and used them in a ritual and destroyed them in the ritual, apparently. So the bones are nowhere to be found because the local Freemason lodge took them. And it's just such a bizarre story, but that corroborates that these oral traditions were telling the truth. They really were at constant war with these giants.
Well, one of the inner orders of the Freemasons are the Jesters.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Well, again, in the book, it's all there, but the highest honor in the craft. Once you get through Freemasonry to 33 degrees, you go into shrining, and I think it's about 13 levels to shrining. It's not as intense, but once you get above shrining, you have to be a master. Well, I think you do have to be a master shriner. There's probably examples where that's not the case, but I think that's usually the situation because it's by invite only do you get invited to become a jester and a member of the Royal Order of the Jesters, but usually they pull from Shriners first. But I think there's probably examples of that not happening. But primarily, you have to be a Shriner. You have to have gone through all the things. You have to prove that you are on board with what they believe 100%. And maybe you'll be chosen. Maybe. But if you ask, you'll never get in. That's basically the rule. You don't ask about it. You just get to be invited to be a jester. Why a jester? Why is being a jester of the highest honor for a fraternal order that's supposedly obsessed with Solomon? You know, what does that have to do with anything? You know,
it kind of makes sense, even if you go back to the
royal
Middle
lines
Age.
descend from the Watchers. All of these royal lines descend from the giants. Look at all of the a lot of European, should I say, royal lines have some telling of how they go back to Odin or one of his sons, right? There's multiple houses through Europe, Wales, and all these other places that have these stories, these histories, if you will, and some of them they're actually like written into the king's books and stuff. So it makes you wonder. Now, Odin himself was a Jotun. His father, grandfather were Jotun, but they were the defenders of man against the evil Jotunar, the man-eaters, right? And the devourers, which is literally what the name means. But it's crippling when you really think that like this same telling of these giant beings happens on almost every continent. We were just talking about it before we went live, Stein and I said, you know, the only one I really didn't look up was Australia. And he started looking some stuff up on Australia. And sure as heck, there's these big beings with this frizzy hair and stuff. It's like, that's pretty wild.
Oh yeah, the Wangina, absolutely. Yeah, the Wangina of the Kimberley region of I think that's the Middle Eastern region of Australia.
I haven't found that much detail, but I mean that's you're wrong. And
they are quite literally the offspring of the rainbow serpents by their mythology, and they mentioned that too. Yeah. They are rain gods. They're bringers of rain, and that's very common with the Nephilim. They're always associated with bringers of storms and weather, just like the Wakinyans of the North American rain gods, which the Heyoka dress up like to evoke, to bring the rains or to scare away the rains, you know. Hence, that's what rain dances are all about. It's about connecting to the Wakinyan spirits. And again, that's no different than the Wangina spirits of Australia, which are these quite literally clown-looking entities with big red afros, white skin, big glowing eyes. They even have the ruffle around the neck a clown costume would have. They have black polka dots going down the chest like the big pom-poms of Poirot from France. And they have like multicolored polka dots of red going all the way down their skin. But they say, oh, well, that's to represent raindrops, you know. But it looks like it's like a monster in a clown costume to me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But quite
literally.
The
picture right here. I mean, that's very like, you know, indeed the red and white also kind of looking like you know, candy cane colors. But indeed, like this could definitely be a clown outfit.
Well, this is what I mean, and the thing is, we'll get into where the clown costume comes from historically, so you can see why this has happened. But it's more like clowns are based off of representations of these beings. Created our own costume in the West, inspired by these creatures like the Wangina you just see there. That's where it comes from. You have the Rakshasas in India. That's their version of a similar creature. You have the Gorgons in Greek mythology as well. That's a very similar image to the Rakshasas, and you find there's a running weaving pattern throughout them all. You have the wild man of Europe. That's our flavor predominantly, and like I said, North America have all their tales of encounters with giants by many names. One of them is called the Nung Nungs, which had a sick sense of humor, would play pranks on them. And one day the chief stood up to them, and the Nung Nungs decided to just kill all the braves and were throwing people in the air and letting them just splat on the floor, you know. And just because they dared to speak up to them, and you can hear the oral traditions of their stories, and they never really, the Duwamish people they were known as, they never really recovered. It was kind of, they never said a thing to them from that day on, because what do you do against a giant, you know? And it's terrifying, but like this running idea that, you know, for example, the Book of Watchers, fiery flying seraphim angels, which are dragons basically, mated with humans or mixed with Mother Earth, or whatever symbolism you want to use for this, and produced these psychedelic clown-looking offspring. Well, that's the Kimberley region story. The rainbow serpent who creates the world that people live in made a giant offspring which taught mankind how to build civilization, and that's the Wangina. And that's the same myth of the Bible, where they became the ancient kings and rulers of the antediluvian age and established themselves in a hierarchy as the intermediaries between the gods and the humans. You had the giants in between, you know, and it's the same story, just kind of dispersed all over the earth with new aesthetical styles of culturally specific aesthetical styles to discuss the same thing with different names and maybe their own slight nuance to mythologies weaved in there, dependent on the geography and what was going on at that time in those specific regions. But in an overarching umbrella style, a lot of my work has been going through these countries, showing that wherever these beings were, clownish features would follow their descriptions. And when it comes to the creation of the clown costume in the West, Freemasons have been intimately linked to it from the very beginning, and they have quite clearly taken all their inspiration from these entities and made a costume we call a clown in the West. But the purpose of the costume is actually a very specific tool used to channel the spirits of these entities from that realm. And this is actually done all over the earth, from India to Africa to Australia. Doesn't matter where you go, wherever this is happening, it's called ancestor spirit worship. And they dress in a clown-like costume with white skin, wild red hair of some kind, red feather dress or reeds or something. They put powder on the face, put multicolored dots all over the body, shining fractal pattern ribbons all over the body or something. And then they channel the entities of their ancestors. But they're not talking about grandma or granddad. They're talking about the builders of their ancient civilizations, these Nephilim creatures, when they were once the kings and rulers. And we have a costume of a clown. Yeah, well, that's quite funny. Yeah. The Ringling brothers who do that, and the Sarasota clowns, they're all Freemason led. All the Ringling brothers were Freemasons, every last one of them.
Have you seen the connection between like the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, and how that goes back, the Rosicrucians and the different orders they split into when Prince Philip or
the bloodline thing is a big deal. It explains why, for instance, if you go back and look at a lot of these kings of Europe throughout the past and queens, why do they always make themselves look like clowns? It's ridiculous. They white. Queen Elizabeth is a prime example of this. With a huge red afro and the white skin and the Venetian cerise.
Now that you mention it.
And she would have that huge ruffle, which would look like a huge serpent plume coming out from her neck and all these type of things. And these are all Nephilim features. She's trying to emphasize her angel blood, descendants of angels, giving them the divine right to rule. It's all about that at the end of the day. Gary Wayne does a lot of fascinating. He has a huge breakdown of this.
Yeah, I'm having him on. I'm actually having him on late September.
Honestly, this was a godsend when writing my book, because he's referenced all the references I need to reference, But if you want to go into the genealogies, pick up this doorstop that he wrote, and he just breaks it all down, all the history, or whether they're all connected, And my book is not quite as heavy as that, but I did an abridged version of his history in this just to give people a quick overview, But it's fascinating.
And it was also in the royal courts of Europe where the court jester was just incredibly valued and just so close to the king, often closer than his own wife, probably.
The Medici queen was known as the Serpent Queen, the Italian queen of France. She became the queen of France for a while. She was the Serpent Queen. I mean, the Medici line, some kind of
Well, the dragon is all throughout Europe. The House of the Dragon, these lineages, and that's what they connect themselves to. The Seraphim class who created these hybrids, these Nephilim creatures. And I believe the secret societies who have the connections to all of these things, they are kind of like the physical foot soldiers on Earth, taking orders from the demonic realms of the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And they take their orders from their parents, which are the angel class who created them, and it's just a hierarchy of spiritual warfare going all the way down through the levels, And then once it gets into the physical realm, they communicate with the peaks of these secret societies who then disseminate the agenda further down to the lower levels, and eventually it gets to us where we're being manipulated. And it gets really complicated, but spiritual warfare is no joke. These things are.
No. I mean, we know all about that. Of course. The angels, aren't the angels supposed to be the good guys?
Well, that's questionable. You got to think, even in the biblical sense, a third of them rebelled and got cast down. A third of them were dropped to earth because they remained neutral, and then the other third remained in heaven. So you had 2/3 of them that weren't quite.
And they have to tell you, what is it? Do not fear when they come up to you. It's like, oh no, do not fear. I'm one of the good guys. Okay, yeah, that's why you have to tell me to not be afraid or not get scared, because you're
that's
one of the
that's almost as scary as I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah, but then like from the higher or highest or higher realm, it's the same energy. Yeah.
Well, I've made a lot of videos in the past on my channel because I do talk about other things, and the angelic rebellion is a fascinating one when you actually really get into all the stories across the earth, and even into the Chinese stories, of dragons. They love dragons. They're obsessed with them. And it seems like the land of the dragon there has a rich history of interacting with these angelic dragon-like entities, and they have this myths weaved into them. And they have a story of the 4 dragons who rebelled against the Jade Emperor because he refused to bring rain to people who had a serious drought. The dragons saw the plight of the people, and these were sea dragons. These were dragons from the sea, a very specific class of dragon, water dragons, And they went to the Jade Emperor and pleaded with him, "Bring rain, please." And the Jade Emperor was like, yeah, I'll do it soon. I'm busy. And he was being entertained by some fiddle player or something. He was just not caring about the plight of the people. Typical, despot king who didn't care, But this is God. We're talking about God. The Jade Emperor is God in this analogy. You know what I mean? He's the creator of everything and the ruler of creation, the bringer of rain and all sorts, But the dragons went to him. The angels went to God and said, "Please bring rain to people." And he said, "Yeah, I'll do it soon." Months go by. Nothing. They go and check on the Jade Emperor, and he's like, "Why have you left your allotted place?" He's angry with them. It's like, "Why have you left the place I've told you need to remain, which is the sea?" They never should have left the first estate. They are supposed to remain in the sea, making sure it functions as creation should function. But when an angel or a dragon leaves where it should be on earth, things go wrong. And I think that's what the analogies in the Bible of leaving their first estate, rebelling against God's creation really comes from. Dragons or angels are intimately linked with the creation itself. Like they are the cogs in the machine that make it function. And when these cogs refuse to move or take themselves out of the machine breaks. And that's why there's this constant theme throughout the biblical narrative that this world is fallen and corrupt. It's broken. It needs to be renewed. It needs to be a new heaven and earth, because the angelic rebellion was really trippy. It messed the fabric of reality up when these dragons refused to do what they were told, basically. And in the Jade Emperor's story, they rebelled against him and brought rain themselves. And the Jade Emperor was so furious that he trapped them under 4 mountains, and which rivers come out of. And they are the 4 mountains in China today. So it's like this mythos, But the narrative that dragons, he was angry they left where they should be, where he arranged them to be, and they controlled water, like the tides or the currents or specific rivers or something. And this is basic paganism, that there are gods attached to forests, lakes, trees, ponds, the sky, the seas, whatever, wherever it is, whatever nature is. There's like a god attached to that in a way, and it has its own conscience attached to it. I think, biblically speaking, that is grounded. That's what the angels are a part of. They're a part of the creation itself. So the angelic rebellion isn't just like angels literally falling out of the sky to earth because he got kicked out of a really high place. It's like they did not like God's choice to put man over them. So they rebelled, and they said, "Well, I'm not going to play your game anymore. Then basically, I'm not going to help this creation happen, which you've given to these beings." And that's where the true rebellion began. And so it's really trippy when you actually get into it. And the creation of the Nephilim was just one step in corrupting God's creation He made in His image, and creating these hybrid monsters in their image, in the image of the dragon, to have dominance over the earth and become the kings and rulers, And that's a quick summary there of biblical history from that trippy angle.
It's a similar tale to Asgard, Midgard, and Utgard. And
fill me in.
Midgard is the land of man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that Midgard means within the guard, right? Asgard is above the guard or top of the guard, however you want to interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I basically see this is like if you look at I don't know, let's say the Italian Alps, right? For example, there is a very secluded set of valleys in between these mountain ranges, and there's a group of beings that basically watch the passes and the overwatching range of mountains so they can see any threats coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was Asgard above the guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And outside of there was the land of eternal winter, right? And there's a lot of different places that the giants and Norse mythology, Germanic mythology actually came from. There's Niflheim, there is Jotunheim, and there's Utgard, which questionably was the capital of Jotunheim. But Jotunheim is the land of eternal winter, right? Now, think about Germany and Central Europe, the Netherlands, and then you get north into like Sweden, Denmark. Back then, let's say, 5,000 years ago, there was still a lot more glacial action down further south, right? It's been slowly melting away and whatnot. They would have been basically keeping people out of these green valleys that were from these frozen lands. And they were giants that were devourers, right? They were man-eaters. So they kept Midgard safe from the beings of these other realms. Now, I find a lot of parallels with, heaven, earth, the angels, the watchers, and what you just went through between all of that.
It's interesting you say that, because there is another parallel story which goes to the Inuit tribes of northern Canada, and they have this story of encountering giants called the Tunit tribe, and the Tunits were the offspring of big giants, like ice giants that came from the north. Whenever the ice sheet was solid during winter, these big giants would come down, mate with the humans, create these giant offspring, the Nephilim, which would call the Tunits, and then they would recede back before the ice would melt and dissipate. You know what I mean? And that's kind of their mythos. But the interesting thing about
the Rainbow Bridge,
it's interesting. It's a very similar story. It's very in a similar geographical location, just on the other side of the North Pole. You know what I mean? And it's quite interesting that they have this idea that these giants came from the north. Symbolically speaking, that could be from the heavens. You could interpret that however you want. But one interesting thing about the Tunit, which is quite odd, is that wherever they encounter humans, they run away. They don't stick around to fight. And these are giants. They could take humans. The stories of, like, you can see them with like whales over the shoulder. You know what I mean? They don't. What's the human to these things? You know what I mean? They don't care. Like, they could sprint extremely fast. They were powerful, muscular giants type of thing. And but whenever the humans came up to them, they would flee. And I've equated this to maybe there's something to do with after the flood. It says in the Bible, God created a people. He called them Israel, and he commanded them to go into the lands of Canaan and kill all the giants, basically. Clear them out of that land. That's your land. They're squatting in it. Go and get rid of them. And they were terrified. It's like, how are we supposed to stand up against giants? They're like, we're like grasshoppers to these things. We've got no chance. And he said, okay, because you have no faith, go out into the wilderness for 40 years. Go and have these battles and fights, and when you finish, you'll be hardened and toughened up, and you'll be ready to do it. That's what happened, basically. 40 years later, you got these rough soldiers, have seen it all and done it all. Like, let's go kill these giants. Let's just do it, And they do, with faith, and they just, bam, wipe them out, one after the other, just moving through the land, just slaughtering giants. I think the giants further north probably heard stories about what was going on and said, let's get out of here. We're not going to win this fight. Clearly, God is on their side or something. These humans are slaughtering us. How is that even possible? But they are doing it. So let's just get out of here before. And let's not stick around to find out. And I think they fled north. I think they went as far north into the ice sheet as they possibly could, where humans can't get to them, because no human can inhabit that kind of land. And then we have these stories of these remaining giants really far north in the ice, who, whenever they see humans, they run. Because it's like, if we fight humans, we die. We don't win anymore, because they've been ordered to kill us. And it's I think that edict's still going. I think that commandment never ended. And it's kind of like, God's on your side if you do it.
When there were so many giants and so few humans, there was a different balance. But once the scales were tipped and we're like, nope, those are the bad guys now, that's it. But like, all right, now back into the order that was commanded to kill the giants, and given that, all right, the Club of Rome and how they bleed down into the Smithsonian, who's been covering up all the giants. I mean, these same orders are still existing, and they're still getting rid of the giants, just in a different way. They're getting rid of the evidence of them.
Well, I think giants are still on the earth. I think we have stories of pockets of cryptid stories of remnants of people encountering giants. I think the Kandahar giants. Bigfoot is a great example. Yep, absolutely. That's the European and Northern American wild man versus Bigfoot. It's all the same thing, But I think these are like descendants of giants now. When you get to Bigfoot, I don't think it's what the great grandparents looked like. I think they're getting a bit more animalistic as time goes on. But
well, been, because of such a slim population, they've probably been having to abide by the Adamic law, you know, and
I mean, I
you
do
have a
believe
very small population, they're definitely inbreeding.
I think they're
Keep the
hiding as
population
well. I think they just
some-
hide wherever they can. They're in caves or underground. They just don't want to be seen or known because every time they pop themselves up, they get killed. So it's kind of, they're probably better off just staying out of the way, you know.
In Ragnarok, it specifically says before the Ragnarok happened, all of the female giants went back into the earth. Now, there's a lot of different interpretations to that. Some of the different Eddas say they sank back into the mud. Some of them say they retreated into the earth. The interpretations all vary just a bit, but it's all the same concept. They went back in the ground.
There's an apocryphal book in the biblical canon, which is the Book of King Og of Bashan, and King Og is mentioned briefly in the main canon as having a bed 13 feet wide, you know, and it's kind of made of iron to support his weight. But in this, it's interesting because in this extra story, it basically follows King Og just screaming for like 50 pages about how much he hates Nimrod because he killed the promised star child. Okay, and this star child was a female who was going to help increase the population of the giants because the giants had a fertility issue. There was no women. They had no women to breed with to continue creating more giants. And he had this promised, prophesied child, this woman that would come, and then Nimrod just killed her. and King Og is just furious, basically, and his whole book is just him screaming about how much he hates Nimrod and for what he's done, for how he's damned us all these type of things, you know, basically. But this idea that the women have gone, there's no women around anymore, there aren't any female giants, and it seems like originally, if you go way back to the Book of Enoch prior to all of this, the Book of Enoch says that the women who mated with the angels became sirens. It says happened here, and it's not specific on how that happened. I've come to the conclusion, and this is based off the Greek mythos, that it's kind of a reward for the women for doing what they did. So to birth a giant is not easy for a normal human woman.
No, definitely
it would just rip you in half as it grows exponentially, and that's what happened. The women just kept dying originally, you know. So I think what they had to do, they had to hybridize the women. They had to genetically engineer them to be human plus something extra, you know, so they were hardy enough to withstand birthing monsters. And if you look at an example of Echidna, she was the mother of monsters in Greek mythology. She's equated with making like 12 of the most famous monsters throughout Greek history, like the Hydra, the Chimera, the Gorgons, the three-headed dog Cerberus. She made them all, you know, that's what they say. And the gods treated her with so much respect that they created a golden underground dwelling place for her to keep her safe, because she was an asset to them, because she kept producing more and more monsters. Her primary mate was Typhon, the sea god, a serpentine, dragon-like sea god of some kind, who mated with Echidna to birth all these monsters, the Nephilim being one of them, which were the Gorgon sect, you know, of those children. But she was a siren. She was used to be a woman who became this serpent beast. She had 2 snake legs instead of legs, and she was this monster, you know, a serpent human hybrid of some kind. And I think that's what you're seeing happening here. They had to hybridize human women, turn them into sirens so they could mate with them and produce more offspring without the women dying. I think prior to that, they were probably just raping women, and the women were birthing and dying all over the place. It was just an absolute bloody mess, you know. And I think they came up with this solution, and the Book of Enoch documents it. It says the women who mated with the angels became sirens, and you know, this is where you get like harpies from, and mermaids and all that type of thing. These seem to be women who made that choice to mix themselves with the gods. Fascinating. It's possible even just mating with gods can have that effect on you. If you think about Dionysus, he just transformed people into fauns and satyrs just by being around him for long enough, just following him around on his merry little party, you know.
When a woman gets pregnant, she's sharing part of that DNA with the baby that's part of the father. So there is a tangible link there. I mean, it's very possible that, like, look at what the human growth hormone and all of the things that the stem cells from the baby will, if a mother is sick, she's more likely to get over it. Her immune system is boosted. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that come with that. So, I mean, highly possible. Think if you mated with a god, I mean, there'd have to be some kind of boost to your system so that you survived the birth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it seems like that all sorts of genetic manipulation was going on in that time zone. It wasn't just the Nephilim being created, which are quite literally half angel, half human. That's something. That's one thing. That's a specific creature. We call them the Nephilim. But I think in the book of Jasher, it talks about the mixing of kinds that happened just before the flood. And this is after the Nephilim were already killed. So the Nephilim actually wiped each other out in a bloody, brutal battle for power, I assume. I don't know what was going on, but it says the punishment for the Watchers is that they have to watch their beloved one kill each other. So that's the giant wars. That's the Titanochemy in that's the Clash of the Titans. You know what I mean? This is the giants fighting the giants and just bodies strewn all over the place, wiping each other out. Now, I do think the offspring of the OG Nephilim, called the Nephil, existed. So they were like a quarter angel, 3 parts human. Then they had children. They had children.
I think that's the tier that King Og would have been on.
Probably even less, to be honest, because then you had the Elio, which were a step down from that, and then the Eliud, which were even further down from that, which were like 1/8 of angel. You know, it gets watered down with each generation. But the OG Nephilim, they were I'm talking giants the size of mountain wiped out before the flood, about 200 years before the flood. But then it says in that gap, that time period, humans decided to manipulate their own DNA, and they started mixing themselves with animals. Basically, the mixing of kinds was going on, and they were blending animals together, and they must have had some sort of wild technology. I don't know what was, or some kind of really trippy magic. Where we
get, like minotaurs, centaurs, etc. from.
That's what the story says. Yeah, that's where you get the Mothmen, the Dogmen, anything, the Fishmen, the Harpies, the Bird Women, whatever. You know, anything that's like an animal.
All of the hybrid. Egyptian gods.
Oh, probably, yeah. And this is what I mean. But these are not Nephilim, though. These are humans who have tried to Nephilimify themselves. They try to become something else. They've rejected the original design and try to engineer themselves into something more powerful. And if you
like head sculpting and putting on really weird animal masks and claiming to be gods of Egypt, I'm just putting that one out there.
Yeah, well, yeah, but the interesting thing is, if you know a flood's coming, it would be in your interest to become a fish person. Okay, when you really think about it. And we have this thing called the Marine Kingdom, which exists today in a spiritual sense. And a lot of African tribes and cultures are really obsessed with this Marine Kingdom, this kingdom of demons in the sea, basically. And it's interesting that it's possible that the sea is full of these hybridized creatures that are left up, that survive the flood. You know,
Lake Baikal in Russia. Lake Baikal is famous, and there's been more than one instance where a group of people have witnessed these silver things that look like people in the lake that just destroyed some of them. And like one group, there was like I guess they were like SEAL divers, essentially. They've been like the equivalent to Navy SEALs training in Lake Baikal, and they went down, and a couple of them were severely injured by these things. So
I agree with you. That's just one isolated case. I mean, the idea that these lakes have these monsters in them that drag people in if you get too close. And there's Mama Wata in the Haitian voodoo culture as well. They are terrified of the water goddess and these creatures that will quite literally just drag you under if you get too close. Australia have their own version of the exact same creatures. The Mimis, I think they call them, and they just yank you under if you get too close, you know. And Europe's full of that, isn't it? You know, and the Maenads, you know, and it's a really common like mythos everywhere. And it seems like these hybrid humans, and we have tales of dog men going quite medieval, just talking about encountering like dog-headed men in medieval times, you know. And we have werewolves, vampire, whatever you see a hybridized human, you know, or these cryptid phenomena we call them today. The reptile people, you know, the Mothman, whatever it is. This is where the mythos for all superheroes comes from, or X-Men. They used to be men, you know, the mutants. There's these people who corrupted their DNA before the flood and seem to have continued down to today, and that's why we get them, you know. And it's odd. I think it was an attempt to be like their fallen gods. I want to be like the Nephilim. I want to imitate them. I want to be more than human, you know. And I think it was a horrible time to be alive as well. And I think if you didn't have that edge you would probably get killed. So you have to do something to yourself. How about giving myself the chitin of the chitin of a beetle, so my skin's impervious to damage or something? Hybridize me with a beetle exoskeleton, or give me wings of an eagle so I can stay above the damage. do stuff to me to make me better, And I think there was a lot of going to the gods for that kind of thing. The angels that didn't mate with women, who weren't cast in chains, they were still around. So I think
we're trying that again now with CRISPR technology.
Well, we've banned it in America so that China can do it.
If China's doing it, Russia's doing it. If Russia's doing it, the US is doing it. It's like if one superpower is doing it, then the other is either also doing it or will follow suit.
Yeah. Look, if history has told us anything, as I've just told you, we will do it given the choice. If humanity's given the choice, they will do it. And they have primed an entire generation of people to want superpower through all the media, superhero films and comic books and all this type of thing. They have predictively programmed people to be like, genetic engineering, cool, sign me up. That's the point of it. Yeah, so it's all one giant conspiracy at the end of the day, and I'm just giving you tiny little snippets here, But the genetic engineering one is it all goes hand in hand with the Nephilim. It all goes back to trying to be something we're not, be better than what we are in our own minds, to emulate old gods. I want to be something like a half angel, half human too. It's that type of thing, And this is obviously, like I said, you have these bloodlines today who have these claims to be slightly angelic blood, but maybe not. Maybe they're just descendants of these humans who corrupted themselves. You don't really know the truth on the matter of these things. No. But what I do know is that demons, the spirits that people deal with today, are the disembodied spirits of perhaps the dead people who did this to themselves, and the Nephilim, who never should have existed to begin with. And they look like clowns in the spirit realm. They look like jesters in the spirit realm. They look like clowns when they were walking around. It's really weird.
Yeah, so how did that look, that form how did that become so popular? Because it is quite literally one of the the biggest phobias there is, like the fear of clowns. I don't know the scientific name.
It's colorophobia. It's literally colorophobia, and it's it is odd, isn't it, that it's up there in the list of fears. It's not like it's not like number 50. It's like in the top 10, and it's really odd, that, isn't it? It's like
every time when you see a clown, it gives some sort of uncanny valley. Like it's human, but like it's not human. It looks human, but I don't know. Like
you really have to wonder though, when that same, we call it an irrational fear maybe now, but when Native Americans are like, nah, if you see these big red-headed frizzy things, dude, run for your effing life. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't an irrational fear. So like maybe it's rooted in our DNA that we are supposed to fear these.
I think so. I really do think so. I think it's like we were so brutalized by these things. We were its prey. We think we're the dominant species on Earth now. These things were the dominant species, and we were its prey. It ate us. Okay, we were just like rabbits to these things. We were game. We were nothing. And I think naturally, that's ingrained deeply into our heritage DNA now to be naturally averted when we see those type of pale white skin, big wide grins, big eyes, red hair.
Have you ever been in nature and been like close to a large cat or a bear?
And we don't really have them in the UK.
Oh man, I'm so sorry to hear that. It's a rush.
I bet.
Anyways, as long as you're with a group, usually you're okay, as long as it's not a large brown bear. But we don't have too many in Florida. But down here we have panthers, which we have black panthers and Florida panthers. And like I go camping at a reserve out west of everything here that's really secluded. You can still see the night sky. There's like no houses for miles around. Good God, there's some big cats out there. And you'll be sleeping and hear something and look outside of your tent. And there is a panther that is like 5 foot long with a 6 foot long tail just marching through your campground like it ain't shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, imagine looking up at a 20-foot giant like that. What do you do? What do you do? You know what I mean? You don't. You get on your knees and bow down and hope this thing understands mercy. Maybe
It's like coming across a grizzly bear. It's that same, well, if I'm gonna die, like, please don't.
right.
But yeah,
there's no point running. Its stride is 20 of yours. You know what I mean? Like, what are you supposed to do? Like,
might as well go down swinging. It's like, if it's a lost battle anyway, might as well go down swinging.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Most people in the antediluvian age worship them instead. They just bowed down because, well, what do you do? After the flood, it was something else.
They're bigger, meaner, stronger. They're quite literally giant bullies.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that leaves an impact on the psyche of collective humanity. I think we now, like I said, when we see a clown, it's like a PTSD flashback to our DNA code. It's kind of like run. It just takes over us, And not me. I mean, not everyone's scared of clowns. Don't get me wrong, but it's odd that they're targeted towards children primarily. And when you think about it, like
because that's the thing. Like they're jokers. They're the funny man. They're in the circus with all these like bright colors, which obviously attracts kids because like what do kids love? Bright colors and funky sounds. I mean, I'm a father of two myself. I would know.
Well, they're comedians, aren't they? It's the perfect camouflage to hide what's really going on. Yeah.
They're comedians. They're acrobats. They're like a one of a kind performer.
Do you think the clowns maybe were made into comedians to make us fear them less, or to try to dull us down to it?
Actually, not really. No, I can get into the history and explain it all to you where we get clowns from, because it's more of a hijacking than an intentional design. To be honest, because if you want to go back to if you want to define clown as just a funny man, then they've existed since human beings have existed. There's always been that need for humor. There's always been the need for that levity in a otherwise brutal existence. You need a bit of lightheartedness and jokes. So that's a very loose definition of clown. The clowns, as we know them, were a very specific creation from the 1800s. So they're actually a very specific not just comedians in general. They go back forever. And people say, the first if you do a Wikipedia search, they'll say ancient Egyptians had clowns in the form of little dwarf people who represented the goddess Besat, and all these type of things. And it's kind of, well, are they clowns or jesters really, or were they just silly men who made jokes? It's not like a clown like we know it as in the West. It's not that word exactly. So let's just fast forward. I mean, it's birthed out of a Italian tradition called the Commedia dell'arte. This is where we get clowns from, and that was kind of developed through throughout Rome and Greek theater, the theater of Aristophanes, and kind of like the Greek tragedy tradition of the masked theater, and even then there was always clown-like characters, but they were all kind of clowns in they were all played a role of comedy, so they can't really call them a clown exactly as a specific thing again, but there was something close in Greek theater called the parasite, and the parasite's role was it was like a drunk or a glutton who would go to the shrines and eat the offerings people had left for the gods, like a true parasitic fashion. And obviously the crowd was like, boo, and it was like, that's the funny thing. That's the joke, that's the jest, whatever. He was the butt of the joke, don't be the parasite. No one wants to be it's like, you don't want to be Homer Simpson, do you? It's that type of thing. You know what I mean? That's the example you're supposed to set, don't be the parasite. So I guess that's like a really proto-clown like character going really far back in history there. But in like let's say like 400 AD, this is where things really get in full swing. Rome has always had quite a popular tradition of mimicry, mimes, stupidus. These are where these things come from, And the mime role was to put on a mask and pretend to be like a Senate member or a king or something, or like a policeman or something, and they would mock the soldier, by putting on the mask and pretending to be that person in an over-exaggerated way.
Yeah.
But when like the collapse of Rome was like slowly happening and Catholicism was taking over, actors were seen as like prostitutes. They were like filthy people who lie. They're just liars. They're pretending to be something they're not, It was kind of it was kind of frowned upon to be an actor. It was like a lowly profession by that point. So a lot of these actors from Rome kind of had to leave and go throughout Europe and find work elsewhere. Yeah. Some of them took on the roles of court jesters. This is where these things come from, because only the king was really allowed to have a jester who's going to argue against a king about religious law. You know what I mean? It's like, So a lot of these jester, personal funny men is what a jester is. It's like a mercenary for hire comedian, isn't it? They were kind of like a hot commodity for the rich and affluent all throughout the medieval period, coming out of that 500 that 500 AD period. So like you find like there was a lot of these jesters becoming popular, but jesters are really just a mimic of the king. It's like the old tradition of mimicry from Rome, but they wore a silly crown with bells like a king. They had a scepter with a king's head on it with a bladder on the end. They were supposed to mock the king. They were a mirror of the king. They were just basically paid mimics, and the king found his humanity in there. And you have all these myths, it's to keep the king humble or whatever. But again, like you were saying, you look into the stories of what some of these jesters got up to. It was wild. They really pushed the limits of what they could get away with the king.
Yeah.
Like
I know of one king who actually got incredibly insulted by what his jester did. So he gave him the death penalty, but since he was the court jester and such a close companion to the king, he let the jester choose for himself how he would want to die. And the jester was actually pretty damn smart, because he told the king, "Your Majesty, if I need to choose, then I choose to die of old age." And I mean, the king couldn't go against it. Like, he literally gave the choice of okay, you're gonna die anyway. How do you want to die? Well, old age.
There's another famous one. There's another really famous, very similar, where he that's classic jester behavior. There's a lot. Well, another one is again really pissed off the king. This jester, and he was basically banished. But then the king heard later that the jester had died, and the king felt heartbroken that his friend had died and what he did to him, that he banished him. So the king went to the funeral, and he said on the funeral, like, "You're forgiven. I'm sorry. I never should have done these things. It's kind of, you were a great friend and a comedian, blah 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 blah." He says, "You're forgiven," and all these type of things. If only you could come back to me. And then the jester hops up out of his grave and says, "Thanks for the pardon." And then that's it, he's back. And it's kind of like he faked his own death so he could get this pardon. You know what I mean? And this thing, another one, he was banished. He says you cannot set foot on I think it was like French soil ever again or something like that. And the jester walks back into the king's court and he says, "Why are you here?" Says, you said I can't set foot on French soil, but then he took his shoe off and he poured out British soil on the soles of his shoes, so he's never actually walking on and it's things like that. But again, they're just comedians, they're not really clown. They don't look like clowns, and no. There's always been need for comedians. So jesters are kind of like a one thing. They're like separate from the clown when you really think about it. And people describe the DMT jesters as jesters because you don't really have another word to describe what you're looking at. What they really mean are more like the Venetian carnival-esque jester type character, which have the Harlequin sequins.
Harlequin. Essentially pixelated Harlequin.
That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about kingly jesters. So let's get into Harlequin. This is where the commedia dell'arte movement really gets into full swing, and this is where we get a clown from. So coming through the 500 year AD, let's say, to 1500, quite literally 1,000 years of history here of development. A lot of actors who left Rome banded together into small troupes and went off and did improvised shows in town squares all throughout Europe. They would just roll in like the circus, whip up a stage, put on their masks and do improvised shows, and the town would laugh along and throw money in a hat for them, and they'd make their living doing that. And they'd have these set routines they would start building with a range of stock characters that never really changed. And there were always things like, the policeman, the soldier, the rich man, the servants, the recognizable characters that any civilization in Europe would recognize.
Kind of like you see in the Humpback of Notre Dame movie. Although, I mean, that's more the gypsies, but there is a jester with them, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's the same idea. Yeah, and there were like I said, there wasn't like just one troupe. It was hundreds of them, and they all had this tradition, and it started to develop into like a more formalized art form, and people eventually, 100 years into this, came to know what to expect when the commedia dell'arte came to their town, and they had these set routines, which if you go and watch it, you would anticipate that routine from that character, and that's the humor. And it got a little bit boring, I suppose, eventually, but they were always pushing the boundaries of improv during these shows as well. And the stock characters were relatively basic for quite a while, but then suddenly in the 1600s, so we're talking like after like 1,000 years of development, a character is introduced called Harlequin. That's the Italian name, Harlequin in French, named after Helikins, which is it's the name of a giant from the myth of a 10th century French monk. Okay. And the giant is described as being tall and hairy with a huge club. And he had a band of like smaller demons with him. Think of the Wild Hunt, of Europe, this type of mythos, and he would basically terrorize and move from village to village, just terrorizing the place. Well, there's this 10th century monk who claimed to have witnessed the running through of Harlequins through his village, and I've got it in the book here. Maybe we can get the exact thing for you if you want to get it up there. But again, the name Harlequins comes from that. It's pronounced Arlecchino in Italian, and that's where we get Harlequin from. So Harlequin is quite literally a representation of European wild man tradition of Europe. And the reason he was added as a stock character is not just because of this one French story. It's because no matter where they went in Europe, any country, any village, they all had a wild man myth. They all had a tradition of the wild man, and they would have this wild party where they dressed like hairy monsters with big teeth, and then they would fast for like 40 days afterwards. You know what I mean? And they all did it. Doesn't matter where you went, they all did this, from Portugal all the way to like Belarus and then to Romania and Bulgaria. Like, it doesn't matter where you went, far north or south, they all had a tradition of the wild man, and they all looked and dressed these hairy, colourful, big, wide, grinning, clown-faced monster things. And they thought, well, that's a stock character. Let's add it to the repertoire of the Comédie de l'Art, no matter where we go. And so Harlequin was quite literally a demon, and he played the role of a demon in his early days. And he wore loose rags with tufts of multicolored hair patches all over him. And he wore a black mask, which looked all rough and angry with the nose all turned up. He had a bit of a horn on one side, and he had this club with him, like the Club of Harlequins from the French mythos. And he would that became the slapstick. And what he could do, he had magical powers. He could slap the stage and suddenly the scene would change. He was kind of like above and beyond the stage. He was a demon. That's the point. He's supposed to represent the demonic energy. He treated his staff like a phallic symbol. He would stick it up people's backsides and be rude with it and pretend it was his phallus himself. And he had this rude, crass humor, and he was dark. He was a dark character. But he also had like this agileness to him. He could do backflips and almost as though he was flying. Because this is an Italian tradition, they kind of added like Mercury in there a little bit, the god of messaging with the feathers on his feet, like the staff of his caduceus, with the serpents on it is like the slapstick of the wild man. But then you have, coming out of the wild man tradition of Bulgaria, that's a Thracian tradition, a really old ancient culture, the Thracian culture. And it's like a continuation of this wild party based on Dionysus and his band of merry Maenads and fauns who would have a wild party, get all animalistic and crazy, you know what I mean? And that's where that culture gets their wild man tradition from, all the way back to like these Mediterranean traditions of strange gods, and it's kind of like they smashed this Mediterranean tradition of these wild man gods with the northern Brutus hairy wild man version, and just created. And Harlequin throughout that 400-year period, well, to today, 1600s to today, he went through a change. He kept getting tighter clothing, more diamond shaped patterns with each iteration. He became a lot more colorful, and he became more like the Venetian carnival style jester character that we know of today. But with each iteration, he kind of lost his demonic edge. He stopped being so brutal and started getting a bit more fancy, a bit more pompous, a bit more educated, and witty, that sort of thing. And he kind of lost that demonic edge, and there was a vacuum left behind. Who's going to play the demonic role now if Harlequin's not? All Harlequin's interested in doing is chasing after the daughter of the rich man, like some lovesick fool, Columbine. He would chase after Columbine, And Pantaloon was angry at this, so he would chase after Harlequin and his daughter Columbine to get her back, And that's the comedy. That's the show. Now, there was two servant characters. Harlequin was one of the servants of the rich man, but he had another servant called Pedrolino. Okay, and Pedrolino just wore plain white Elizabethan servant rags, completely white, no black, nothing like that, just completely white with a big floppy hat. And he was the servant who would chase after Harlequin with the rich man. Pedrolino and the rich man versus Harlequin and the daughter, and they just chase each other. That's the comedy. you know, and all sorts of Looney Tunes antics would ensue, you know. You would find this tradition was kind of like becoming main staples in countries and was staying put rather than traveling. And France had their own version of this. They had the Harlequin character, but they also had Poirot. Now, Poirot is Pedrolino, but the French clown, the white-faced, is quite literally just a slightly darker version of Pedrolino. Loose, white rags, white face, white hat, but he also had big black pom-poms put onto him, and his makeup was more like sad. He was always sad. In typical French fashion, he was just a misery, you know. He was really upset that why does Columbine love Harlequin and not me? You know, woe is me. That's the French flavor of Pedrolino. Britain had their own flavor, and this is where you get the clown. The Pedrolino was called clown, which is like kind of like a colloquialism for like clodhopper, like fool, drunk, you know, something like that. And that was the British version. So Britain had Harlequin, the rich man, the daughter, and clown. And clown was crazy. He wasn't like a good servant. He didn't really care about his master, really. He just wanted to drink beer and eat sausages, you know what I mean? And that was he was a funny character, you know. And he had more of like an edginess to him than the other clowns all throughout Europe, you know, these Pedrolinos and characters. And like I said, there was a vacuum. Like, who's going to play the demonic role if Harlequin's not going to be like that anymore? And the British clown started to take that role over. And there's kind of a switch going on, you know, in character. And the clown became the leading role rather than Harlequin. Prior to him, Harlequin was the lead because he was so outrageous. And now it's clown in Britain. And you find other culture side following suit. But with this change in character, you find in the 1800s, there was this actor called Joseph Grimaldi, who was kind of like always been entrenched in the industry. His father was a famous clown actor as well, from Italy, funnily enough, you know. And he even worked for Queen Charlotte, his father, as a dentist before going off and starting a dancing school and then heading up Sadler's Wells Theatre in London, you know, breaking off to be this actor. And his son was always in the theatres with him, growing up as an actor with him, you know. So he's always in the family. But this young Joseph Grimaldi, he was given this leading role in this show. And it was an interesting time in theatre in the 1800s, like 1799 to 1800. So Joseph Grimaldi had married the daughter of the person who owned Sadler's Wells, Richard Hughes. And Mary Hughes died at childbirth. So Joseph Grimaldi, this famous clown actor, and these British pantomimes, rife with his life is a tragedy. It's awful. Like, it's just one thing after another. He got his inheritance robbed from him. His brother died and disappeared and died. His wife died at childbirth. He died a broke cripple with vicious arthritis. It was just a horrible life. Okay, but after his first wife died, Richard Hughes, the manager, basically said to the new showrunner he had just hired, Charles Dibdin, "You better give him a leading role. My daughter on her deathbed said I have to look after him." So he was given this leading role on the stages, and he upstaged this old, like, French actor who had always played the clown. He's called Dubois. But he, rather than just like kick Dubois off the stage, he made them have two clowns, and they made them compete to see who's the funnier clown. And the audience just loved Grimaldi. They loved him. Like Grimaldi's described as like, he doesn't act like a clown. He is the clown. That's where we get it from. It's him. Like, he is the embodied. Like, there was no greater actor of the time. People loved him. He was so famous for playing this role. He embodied the spirit. Well, yeah, he just had this amazing charisma about him that people loved. They loved it. You know what I mean? They couldn't believe, like it was just side-splitting humor. You know what I mean? You go and see this guy, you're gonna have a good time. But he was a sad, really sad clown stereotype. You know what I mean? Off the stage. Like, the brutal, horrible life. Like this. Yeah, like, well, get this though. Like, so that costume you're seeing there came a lot later. If you just type in Joseph Grimaldi into a Google search, and I'll tell you which one to click.
I also have Grimaldi and Son here. That's just basic.
Well, he went on in later years. He had his own son there behind him who did a lot of stage performances with him. Yeah. He died of alcoholism. He died at a young age. So he lost his own son to alcoholism as well. And so it's really horrible. Like, Joseph Grimaldi had a horrible life. But those costumes you're seeing there, they weren't always the case. Type in Pedrolino. Like, type in Pedrolino, and you can just look at the white costume of a clown that used to be.
I had one. Hold up. Let's see. From a Piero, but it's basically the.
There has to be a Proto-Indo-European root to this, though, because if you look at like. I follow things back through languages also, right? And like different spoken languages will have similar tales for their religions and, you know, folk tales and all this other stuff. And then you can follow them back to like different roots and see where it split off.
Oh yeah,
from.
well, wait till you figure out where this comes from. So this is Puero. This is the French version of Pedrolino. Pedrolino, the Italian version, looks very similar to this. It's more of a tighter fit garb though, with a bit of a bigger neck ruffle.
Yeah.
So the British clown you saw there is far removed from this. Something else. Yeah. You know, it's like a peacock in comparison. You know, it makes no sense. Why would you change this costume that has literally been the same for 1,000 years? Who changed the costume? Well, if you look into it, the showrunner who was looking after Joseph Grimaldi at his boss's request, you know, was called Charles Dibdin Jr. Charles Dibdin Jr. was the son of Charles Dibdin, who was a very powerful Freemason of the day. Very famous. Extremely famous. We're talking like an Illuminati industry mogul of the era. You know what I mean? Like he wrote
Rockefeller Foundation level.
He wrote all the plays, theaters. Yeah. He wrote all the music of the day. You know, he's a very popular playwright in music. In fact, even to this day, we close the proms in Britain, an orchestral ceremony, with his song Tom Bowling, even to this day. Okay, so he was a big deal. He wasn't like a nobody, and his son just happened to get given this gig running up one of the most popular theaters in London. So it's pure nepotism. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't fall far.
To be so.
Yeah, and what a strange coincidence as well that this is when the costume changed, and you'll actually find that Charles Dibdin Sr. was obsessed with India. He loved India. His brother Thomas Dibdin, who Tom Bowling is named after, died in India, colonizing it with the East India Company, which is like a not technically British military, you know, it's a private company who was colonizing it, you know, that type of thing. And it's kind of you know, and he traveled back and forth to Calcutta all the time, you know, to visit his brother, and he was even going to live there, but he decided not to go due to bad weather. It stopped his boat from setting off, and he changed his mind. He loved India. He knew India intimately, and he understood, no doubt, as a Freemason, Indian iconography, symbolism, and the occult of India, India demonology. And if you look at the early costumes of Joseph Grimaldi, so just type in, you are going to have to do a Google search for this one. Just type in Joseph Grimaldi and look for a picture of him doing a handstand. And you have to see you have to see this to believe it. You really do.
I know which picture you mean. Grimaldi stand. Let's see what I can find. If I can. Okay, well, let's actually use Google, not Brave.
Yeah, so you are gonna have to use Google for this one. Like, you share the screen with us, I can point to what needs to be.
Yeah, let's see. Getting all kinds of handstand results, but not what.
Just type in Joseph Grimaldi; it will come up. You don't have to like search specifically for handstand. It's quite a popular picture. Just Joseph Grimaldi. And,
I know the picture you mean. There we go. That's the one. Okay, can I actually just get this one? Thank you. Awesome. That one.
Yes, there we go. So that costume there is identical to the costumes worn by the Rakshasa demons on the temples of Hindu temples. It's identical. Now, if you type in Thailand Rakshasa temple or something like that, or Rakshasa on Thailand temple, and you'll see them holding up the temple, dressed in the exact same costume, looking very similar.
Compass and square. I'm just saying, there's a lot of symbology in that pose.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there is. Even then,
what's the demon's name?
So it's Rakshasa, Rakshasa.
Oh yeah, Rakshasa. Okay,
Rakshasa. And just type in Thailand temple, which is obviously Hindu influenced.
Yeah. Let's go back to Google. Rakshasa.
And there's loads of examples there. Usually there's like many of them in a row, all holding up their arms, holding up the temple pillars or something like that.
Yeah. A lot of those indeed. I have
they have white skin with colored patterns on the cheeks and all the rest of it. Big wide grins, teeth sticking out, and they wear that polka dot dress that he's wearing. It's the exact same clothing. It's supposed to be battle clothing. It's like armor for the demons. But I believe the Nephilim actually had skin that looked like that. I think they had serpent skin. I think they had really psychedelic looking patterns all over their skin, and inherited from their fiery flying serpent parents, very colorful in nature. But these ones on the temple are wearing this clothing instead. If we can get any image up there of just a Rakshasa demon. And there's also another specific Rakshasa demon, which is popular in Bali, which is off the same Hindu tradition. And it's called the Kala Sungsang, which literally means upside down demon. It's in that exact same pose that you see.
Yeah,
Grimaldi
let's
in there.
see. I have the.
So there they are in
they're
Thailand.
holding up
Rakshasas.
the temple.
So these are and the Rakshasa mythos is quite literally man-eating giants. That's what they are. You know, some of them were good, some of them were bad. The Asuras and the Rakshasas, and there was this dichotomy of duality within the whole mythos. But fundamentally, they all look identical. They all look like this. So that's where the costume of the clown comes from. Specifically, that was inspired and brought over from the east to the west by Charles Dibdin Sr. And he told his son to dress the clown like this. A very popular actor of the day that everybody loved.
Wikipedia actually has
let's dress him up like a demon. No one will know, but we've just popularized that image in the West without them realizing it, you know, through the means of using a popular actor. But the Kala Sungsang demon is like a Balinese version of the same demon, and he's in the same position with the handstand, with the head turned up, with the big smile. It's really common, and that's where it comes from. That's where the image of a Western clown was originally borrowed from in the 1800s. And all clowns since then have been based on that original model that Joseph Grimaldi was dressed in. But if you go to the historical records, it's never addressed anywhere where the inspiration for the costume change came from. It just says that there was a costume change made. That's all you'll find in any memoir anywhere. And he called them dresses. That's all we know.
Sounds like there's the Rockefeller Foundation. If you look at a lot of the school books, right, and get a hold of like school books from like the 1930s and the 1950s. Like my grandparents used to have like these old elementary school books and stuff. They just kept, and all the grandchildren got to play with them at their old camp and junk. It was a vast change, because you'd see like the geography book used to be like this. Right. And then the next edition of it was like this. Then the next edition of it was like this. And the next edition was like this. Pretty soon the geography book's a little paperback thing. You know, it's like, where did it all go?
Well, this is it. But I mean, you look at the memoirs of Joseph Grimaldi, and he just wore the costume. You know, you didn't really even think about it. He wasn't really he had his own problems. You know, he wasn't really concerned with that. Through his own mania, created the face paint style that we know with the red squares on the cheeks. But prior to that, he was already wearing white face makeup. It wasn't like he came up with that idea, because he was borrowed from the French choir anyway. This is the Kala Sungsang demon, yeah. This is the Balinese representation of the same demon you find in Thailand.
Even got the checkered shorts.
Yeah, the checkered pattern's really common in Bali, actually. It's everywhere, and they would always fight. They had this epic battle between the Bali Barong and the demon queen Rangda. And she also has the big tongue sticking out, wild, crazy red hair, bulging eyes. It's all the same imagery, because we're talking about the same creatures, different names everywhere. I mean,
Goddess Kali is very well known for that.
Well, if you know, even the Gorgon in Greek mythology has the exact same visage. I'm not talking about the snake-haired Medusa. We know it.
She was a very specific Gorgon.
Well, she's a modern iteration. The original Gorgon looks nothing like Medusa as we know it, with a serpent with green skin and snakes for hair. It looks like a white-skinned, big, wide-grinning Rakshasa demon with red hair. That's what all the ancient stone reliefs of Gorgons look like. And then they got popularized into this serpent-haired woman we know today. That's not what Gorgons originally looked like. They look like this. And that's just a Rakshasa demon. It's the same thing, just in Greece, you know, and they have a different name and a different mythos, but it's the same creature. This is what happens when you hybridize a human with a serpent god. You get something that looks like this, and the tongue's always sticking out, and obviously equating that to clowns and mockery. That's the symbology's always been there, you know.
But the pointed teeth, the canines,
the predators, you know, the hunters, you know, they are predators and hunters. And this is what I mean. So that costume of a clown, that's where you first get what we know as a clown today from. It was injected into a popular media of the day, theater, by Freemasons, quite literally. And it's to get the demon on the stage, to get it popularized in the minds of the people. And then this costume is worn in other cultures to channel the spirits, these creatures, you know. And so now we have people dressing like these creatures in Britain and in Europe,
the demons,
doing the same thing without realizing it, because it's been occulted in the West. It's hidden in the West.
You know, we've had discussions on this before about like how many different things have they tricked the public into doing, right? Like how many different spells in particular, you know what I mean? Or like different castings. Just have they talked people into doing as like a internet prank or this or that, you know what I mean?
And like the milk crate challenge, for example. That's literally the like, was it the Masonic steps, like literally representing that, you know, going up and all of that. I mean, just so many things. By the way, bro, your cam shut off. I don't know. Maybe it's overheated or something. Oh, and there he goes. Okay.
He'll be back, I'm sure.
He will.
We'll keep the show going, but that's just where we get a clown from. From there, it was highly popularized. Everyone saw Joseph dressed like this, and we're like, "I'm going to dress like this from now on. This is brilliant." You know, this is now, from now on, this is the new costume standard. All clowns are based on this clown from now on, and Joseph Grimaldi has been given all the credit. You see. He is known as the father of modern clowns. Everyone believes he invented the costume. He came up with that image first. He came up with everything to do with the clown. He wasn't. He was just an actor. He was just a guy who wore the costume that his boss told him to wear, you know. But he's the fall guy for it all. He's been given all the glory because they don't want people to know where it actually comes from and what it's inspired by. So even if you look about the history of a clown, from Harlequin to clown, they have always been a representation of demons. First, the wild man of Europe, the European flavor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All of those things, all of those beast men, you know, that's Harlequin. And then clown took over, and he was modeled after the Indian Eastern version of the same creature. So the clowns have quite literally always been a representation of the demon. They've never not been that. People just don't know that. And then obviously clowns became like more synonymous with circuses, which traveled rather than theaters from then on. And obviously you have rich mogul businessmen in America putting on big circuses, and it's kind of the station.
Stephen King's It, like the way he modeled Pennywise as feeding off of children and everything, it kind of rings that bell, you know.
It's an interdimensional energy harvester, which is essentially what demons do today, you know. And obviously, why model them after a clown? Well, I think Stephen King is probably in the know about what all this really means and represents today, because the clown has been molded since then into a perfect symbol, a perfect amalgamation representation of Nephilim features. It's been perfected since the Grimaldi days, you know what I mean? And like I said, I think they saw like the Wangina, for example, and incorporated that imagery into the costume, and then you got a red afro, you know what I mean? I think they kept adding more details from other cultures as they traveled and learned more about how they represent the demons, and they molded this.
In the Netherlands and Belgium, very popular. I've watched so many, series, shows, seasons. Posse and Adriaan, all of our Dutch and Flemish fans and listeners, watchers should absolutely recognize these two. Posse, the clown. Adriaan, he's a acrobat. They're part of a larger circus, I believe the Circus Rens, which is one of the biggest circuses, at the very least in the Netherlands, maybe even Europe. Used to be a kid show. Like it was on TV.
See if you can find Bozo the Clown from America.
Yeah, he's cool.
Dio. Dude, that was one of the, like, I thought that like Pennywise was modeled after that until I got a lot older. Like I saw Bozo the Clown and was like, that just looks evil to me. You know what I mean? Like even the old black and white Bozo the Clown, it just looked evil.
Yeah, well, like I said, there was this odd expansionist movement, and clowns kind of became useful for circuses, because it's kind of, while the scene was changing, the clowns would come out and distract the audience, so they wouldn't pay attention to what was going on behind, you know. So they were useful in that respect, but it feels like they kind of stuck with wherever Freemasons went, because it seemed like all early circuses of America were run by Freemasons, pretty much all of them. And it's
look
quite
at the rodeos.
There's a huge long list of Freemasons who owned all the circuses. And quite late in life did P.T. Barnum get involved, and he was a member of the Oddfellows.
The big fluffy collar. I mean, and his collar, look, when you say serpent's collar, that, I mean, Bozo the Clown was the ideal version of that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Even his hair, man, like it's horns, it's serpents, like it's freaky.
It's freaky. It is freaky. It's uncanny, isn't it? There's something weird about it. We just don't like the way that looks naturally deep down within us for some reason. And I'm not even somebody who really cares. I know I talk a lot about clowns, but I didn't grow up caring about clowns. You know, this is not something I thought I'd end up talking about. I won't say I have a fear. I won't say I have a fear of clowns either necessarily. But even I can look at that as somebody who's indifferent and go, that's just weird. It's just odd. Why children? Why target that?
I remember when the circus still traveled around, and like when I was a kid, we would go to the circus almost every year. The fair would come at one time a year. The circus would come at another time a year. And I mean, you know, it was really kind of heartbreaking finding out why the circus ended. Bed bugs. They couldn't get rid of the bed bugs on the trains they traveled around on in the caravans.
Oh shit, man.
Yeah. So it bankrupted them trying to fumigate.
Today, all the circuses that do run and still travel are all owned by the Shriners, specifically, because they've got the money to back it all up anyway. And it's kind of old-fashioned now, circuses, but they're all Shriner-led. You'll find all Shriner sects have their own clown section within each.
It is also the Shriners who are involved with hospitals, right?
Yes.
Children's hospitals.
Where dying children are, they send in the clowns to entertain them. Or
the clinic clowns. That's a big thing here in the Netherlands as well. For indeed, like the more terminally ill children.
Now, who in the hell wants to see that on their deathbed?
Play the clown like that.
You have to wonder, don't you? You have to wonder what the real intention is behind it. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of these clowns have good intentions. I don't think they realize what they're actually doing. You know?
The people doing it, yes, but like the symbology behind it and the fact that a lot of kids fear them in modern day, right?
They do.
And it's just shocking that that's still done.
Well, it's odd because the studies that have been done. So most of the studies do show that kids are actually terrified of clowns. They're not.
It's like kids have a good reason for it. This is a meme, but you know, and it's funny. I actually just saw this on the balloon. It says 33 flavors. So
yeah, well, this guy Pogo, the clown, is that character. That's obviously John Wayne Gacy. He killed 33 young men. Funny enough, there's your number again. And he only started doing the clown thing halfway through his murder spree. And I've got a whole section of this in my book, but if you look into it, you'll find that he was only an hour's drive away from his local Royal Order of the Jesters Lodge, where he lived. And he was only an hour and a half north of the Indianapolis headquarters for the Royal Order of the Jesters. And he was even caught and recorded by the police talking to two men about trafficking a child to him, which became his victims, saying, I'm not going down for what you guys did and all this sort of thing. And if you look into the Royal Order of the Jesters, they're renowned for human trafficking. That's what they do. So it's likely he started communicating with these people and then did his clown thing because he learned what that was all about, and was likely feeding the demon by murdering people. And obviously all the symbolisms there. He had a Secret Service pin at one point. He was a public servant. He worked on the lighting in his area and was commended for that and all these type of things. He knew politicians. He was a member of the Buffalo Lodge in his local area as well. The whole thing is dodgy as hell, and I think he definitely worked with the Jesters to get some of his victims, and I think that's why he started dressing like a clown. I think he learned the secret and started incorporating it into his ritual.
If I'm not mistaken, this is just pulling from what I learned from the Occult Rejects. It's the Shriners who operate the hospital and the Jesters who provide the transport. Am I right?
Well, it's all in-house charity. They're all trying to commit tax fraud. That's fundamentally what it's about. It's all for charity, so they can get tax exempt. You know, but really, there's this woman. I'm going to have to get a name now. It's going to drive me crazy, and you'll have to check out her book. You might even try and get her on as a guest, to be honest. But she broke down. I'm going to have to get it for you and share it with you guys. But she basically broke down all the tax fraud that Shriners are involved with, and the Jesters, and how they hide behind the charity status to avoid taxes based on these hospitals that they run. But she's looked into the money and followed the money. And it's like 2% of the money they earn goes towards the hospitals. Where's the rest of it going? You know what I mean? And she's looking into it all, and it's dodgy as hell.
Large.
And it's into dark stuff. You know what I mean? They're doing really, really, really dark things. And I must have it here somewhere.
I mean, I'm sure that organizations like the Cleaning Clowns here in the Netherlands, they do try and make the unbearable moments a little more bearable. Like I'm sure that the people who are actually on the floor with those children, that they have the right intentions. It's just
I'm not saying all people who dress like clowns are evil. They're not. Most people who dress like clowns have no idea what I'm talking about. They do not know this. They're
entertainers, rodeo clowns, right? These guys are the most important person in the world to the cowboys that are riding, because when they get bucked off, they are distracting a bull from stomping your head in. So it's
they serve a purpose, which is beyond this. I think there's defined lines we could cross here. I'm just telling you where the costume comes from and what it's modeled after specifically. Okay, and I am of the belief that it doesn't matter if you're aware of the spiritual law or not. Dressing like something channels the thing, whether you know it or not. And if you're wearing the costume of a clown, especially at Halloween, Samhain, when the veil is the thinnest between the spirit realm and our realm, you're becoming a pretty open channel for these things, because you're mirroring in that realm and creating a connection to it. We need to be careful about what we choose to dress like. And the clown,
our ancestors.
Yeah, well, the clown costume is a tool to these occultists, and it's this very carefully crafted symbol that they use for their own rituals, and they're pushing it on us. They're trying to get more and more people dressing like this because it opens up more channels to their gods.
There is a movie like that, isn't there? Like quite a pretty recent one where the guy is actually transforming into a clown.
That was made in 2014. It's called Clown. Quite simple. And it is about a man who needs a clown costume for his daughter's birthday, can't get one anywhere. He finds one in the attic, puts it on, does the show, can't take the costume off afterwards. It's fusing to his skin, and he starts to transform into a reptilian serpent clown monster. Okay, and it turns out he's put on the skin of an ancient demon called a cloyne in Scandinavian folklore. By the way, completely fictional. There is no such thing in Scandinavian folklore as a cloyne. Okay, people think it's real, and it's like, no, don't be stupid. That's completely it's made up for the movie. Okay, there's no such thing as a cloyne. All right, that's not a thing just for this movie. But the story is basically saying you put on the costume of a clown, you get possessed by the spirit it represents. Quite in a very literal sense in that movie. I think he has to eat 5 children to break free of the curse or something like that. That's the movie. But he can't take off the costume. He rips off his own nose trying to get the clown nose off. It's like
even more recent, Art the Clown from
Serial Killer Clown.
Yeah.
There's always a new Joker rendition every so often. There's always a new
Joker coming out.
There's always a new It. They're always going to keep rebooting these things. I think Killer Clowns from Outer Space has just got its release on the Xbox, brand new version.
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, Beetlejuice is about to come out.
What is he but a demonic clown? Exactly. Like in every aspect of it. He's not checkered, but he's got a striped suit, big hair.
He's always on the front cover of the movie. He's represented as a giant on top of a house. He sat on top of a house. He's a giant.
Man.
They're always telling you. They're always showing you.
The very popular horrorcore group, the Insane Clown Posse.
Mm-hmm.
I met them, dude. I met Violent J and larger than life people. Let me just say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I went to a concert. I had left the hospital. I had a hernia, and I was in the hospital, and my buddy had gotten tickets to the show, and I'm literally like in the room talking to the doctor, and they're telling me on my phone, like texting me, "Yo, we got to go. We're going to be late." I'm like, "Well, I'm at the hospital. Come pick me up. Text me when you're outside. I'm leaving the hospital to go to the show." So we got there. My buddy got close enough to the stage to tell Lazy Bone, who was from Bone Thugs and Harmony, and they did the show with him, that I left the hospital because I was such a fan, and the dude's like, "I want to meet this guy." So after the show, they walk out back, and we said we were going to this club up the road, and they were like, "We'll go with you guys," and we got to sit down and hang out with them for a whole night. It was really cool. You know what I mean? But when you meet them in person, Violent J and just a very large guy. Like,
oh yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm 6 foot. He's like a large dude, bro. Like looking under his armpit. Yeah.
And it's funny, like I keep bringing up the Occult Rejects, but Nick does so much with it. They did a whole Magi's Behind the Mic. It's a series that he does, and apparently the Insane Clown Posse, in their own words, use the same tactics that the devil does, but instead they're using it to bring you closer to God. So they're using the same temptation, the same rituals, if you will, but like instead of drawing you closer to evil, they're drawing you closer to good. Yeah, Shangri-La, but then again, it is the Dark Carnival, the Hatchet Man always talking about fucking murder and all of that. And I mean, they're definitely magicians of some sort.
Well, now you know what the clown represents. You have to question the motives even more. But I don't know, to be honest. Maybe they believe that's what they're actually doing. I don't know. But at the same time, I think they did a Halloween concert last Halloween in a Freemason lodge. You know what I mean? So you also have to wonder, like, when you start looking into all this, like, it's a bit dodgy. Maybe they're just a couple of guys who couldn't make it rapping normally, did the clown thing, got a load of like support and stuck with it, and now they're just stuck with it.
I mean,
who knows?
It definitely worked for
Hollywood. Look what the Freemasons did to Hollywood. Now you have all these actors in the Screen Actors Guild, which is like another Mason's creation. They basically cannot step outside of certain cultural norms and boxes that have been set for them. They can't say certain things publicly, whether they're true or not, or they believe them or not, or they will be ousted from the guild, right? These guys are basically sculpting our public opinion, and they have been for a while. Now, why did all of a sudden clowns go from being these entertaining figures back to being dangerous and demonic? That's my question.
It's like, an externalization of the hierarchy. They want you to know what it really means, and they want you to be okay with it. They're pushing clowns.
They soft normalized it, and then they're slowly bringing in the dark aspects.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll find I did a video, episode 43 of my series, and it's about just the clown in media of the last 10 years. I capped it at 10 years because you can go way back and start talking about Bozo and all these other ones. I said, let's just look at the last decade, and you'll realize we have been bombarded with clown stuff. Like, they have been bam clowns everywhere. They're in everything all over the place, and I've been showing where they've been showing it in these popular shows that have been coming out, and they're letting you know what they look. They're letting you know what it really is, even if you consciously become aware of it or not. They're not really hiding it anymore. It's kind of shocking. I mean, just in the start of 2023, clown core fashion was going down the runways in France and Italy and everywhere, and they were pushing it.
They want all these other things though that have been normalized right alongside of it, right? You have, but it's a similar aspect. The vampire, right? You have the vampire that had this first almost like a comical appearance. It was dark, but it was mildly comical, and then it built up into a Dark Shadow style comedy, right? Where it was absolute slapstick kind of comedy with vampires, and then this like normalization in Twilight where they're just normal people. You know what I mean? We've got, and with aliens too. Right? We've got all of these normalizations. Now you've got a being from space, a being that feeds off of other living beings, right? And then these clowns, and they're normalizing all of these things side by side through Hollywood and through all of these main scopes of our ingesting of media.
It's powerful. It's powerful. I mean, I always say that the real secret to like making it big in the industry, whether that's art, music, film, or whatever, it's not to have talent. That has nothing to do with it. Just dress like a psychedelic fractal pattern clown monster, and you will be chosen. They will put you in the spotlight. They will make you big because they want you to be an idol looking like that. Because then if you look like that and you've made it big, people will look at you and go, I will also dress like that to be famous like them. You become an idol and people emulate their idols. Then you've got more people dressing like clowns, whitening up the skin, redding up the hair, multicolored patterns all over the skin, tattoos everywhere, whatever it is, And look at David Bowie. He's a legend, right? He dies a legend, forever ingrained in history that everyone will remember for eternity. And he's always shown with his pale white skin, red hair, lightning bolt, multicolored
Ziggy Stardust.
Ziggy Stardust character. But the thing is,
Diamond Dogs. Oh my God,
personally,
that was even more freaky looking.
Personally, I think he's a crap musician and has terrible music, but he's immortalized as a god because they want people to emulate him. They want you to copy him.
He had like 3 good songs, one on each album, and then a whole slew of swill.
I couldn't care less about the guy. But apparently, I'm supposed to think he's a god worth worshipping. And it's not because he has talent, or he made good music. It's because of the way he dressed. They want more people to look like that. They want you to copy them.
Well, Dylan as well, right? He had his like clown-ish face.
It's everywhere. Honestly,
Yeah.
again, look at my video about this in the music industry. That's the secret to the music industry. The most famous ones are the ones who look the most crazy like clowns. And there is a reason for that. You get chosen, you get elevated by those who run the industry. I mean, the Freemasons,
Gimmicks will always work. I mean, just like the craziest fucking gimmicks there are. I mean, great example that I can think of, the hard rock band from Finland, Lordi, who won the Eurovision Song Festival, not because their song "Hard Rock Hallelujah" was just so like incredibly good. I mean, it's a decent hard rock song. I'm not gonna knock it, but it's because of their gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they won, because they dressed up all monstrous and freaky with like the prosthetics and
it definitely helps, absolutely. But the thing is, you'll find the white face, red lips aesthetic is the most popular one in the music industry. That if the artist doesn't start off dressing like that, you guarantee they'll end up looking like that towards the end of the career. Okay,
the Rolling Stones logo, the Rocky Horror Picture Show,
all of it.
I mean, it was flooded in the media. It was flooded in the media.
Now I've said it, especially the 80s period. The 80s period of music was full of it. It was unbelievable, But now I've said it. You start looking and you'll notice a pattern. They're all doing it. They're all whiting up the skin and redding up the lips. They're clowning themselves up more and more the more into the industry they become, because they're in the industry of making idols for the public to copy. And the more people they can get dressing in these features, the stronger they're creating channels for the spirit realm through the vessels.
Latest thing with that
ladies makeup.
I don't think Miley Cyrus like really started it, but she popularized it, like with the tongue out and all,
the tongue sticking out. Yeah,
now all of a sudden everyone is doing it. Like you could say Miley Cyrus like kind of went back to normal, and now all of a sudden Katy Perry has the like short bleached hair and sticking the tongue
she's
out.
Doing it too. Yeah,
I mean, people in like more of our circles were even saying that the demon that possessed Miley Cyrus is now possessing Katy Perry, and it's like, well, wouldn't surprise me if
Jojo Siwa
does,
Oh yeah, Jojo Siwa, yeah, that's a new one.
Dude, look at this, right? Well, how many stars were every photo shoot they were doing? They'd have like one eye covered somehow. You know what I mean? It's
or the black goo.
Yeah.
There is this, oh God, what was it in the 70s? There was something that they would put in the background of all these photos, the obelisk, right? And then I think, was it Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd? One of them did an album and they actually made a joke of it because they just like put it in every picture. It's like these families sitting at the coffee table and it's sitting there on the coffee table and they're just looking at it. But like in all these like Hollywood features for like years before that, there would just be like this black obelisk on a bookshelf behind people. You know what I mean? And it was like always in a shot somewhere. they add these things in, and I think they're leading us somewhere, right? I really do. I think they're leading us to this final conclusion, and we're all going to see what it is in this big unveiling of these curtains.
Something like that. In terms of like placement, Doja Cat's been obviously said she's been very demonic lately. She's been, and she did a thing where she's dressed like a black demon, isn't she, in a music video? Like, and she's in like a kitchen, opening all the cupboard doors open and slamming them shut and stuff like that. If you look to the bottom corner, there's a biscuit tin that is a clown. It's like they put these things everywhere, and it's always kind of been there. It's one of these things. Now I pointed it out. You can go look back at things or look at current media, and you'll realize, that this really is everywhere, and it's reflected in even movements. For example, like I call them the multicolored collective. And it's that extremely left-wing, ultra-liberal types who have a rainbow-colored flag as their thing, like this, the multicolored collective, which is a big umbrella term for a lot of factions within that. But their general aesthetic is bright-colored hair, wacky tattoos, piercings, lipsticks, colorful clothing, and multicolors. And I think the spirit running through them is reflected in the way they look, if not vice versa. And I think it's all kind of there. And you can kind of see, it's kind of like glimpsing into the spirit behind something now. If they have that look to them, they've likely got the Nephilim spirit in them.
I think LSD, I think LSD only allows you part way there, right?
Yeah.
So, because I've done a whole range of otherworldly experiences, if you will, because it's all tapping into some other realm, as far as I see it, like a psilocybin, the very most basic version. All right. On the most basic form, right? And even in small doses, you start making connections that you look at something, you're like, oh yeah, it just like things that never occurred to you before instantly occur to you, right? In that it's very cerebral, but you know where you are. You're still tethered very much in reality, right? Mescaline is a little further up that. Then you get LSD, and then like peyote is another notch up, and then you get into the wild ones. Well, like peyote is pretty effing wild. But then you get into the other ones like the DMTs and stuff and ayahuasca and all that. Now, I have not done ayahuasca, but isn't ayahuasca just getting a form of DMT?
Ayahuasca is an MOA inhibited version of dimethyltryptamine. So dimethyltryptamine is normally broken down very quickly by the human body. So the trip will only last about 10 minutes if you ingest it through the crystal form or vaporize it. What the Amazonian basin tribes discovered is that if you mix the specific vine, the Beaker vine, with this other leaf, which it has the active compound of dimethyltryptamine within it, and make the brew correctly, the vine would inhibit the breakdown of the DMT in your digestive tract, because normally the acid would break it down too fast for you to process it. It stops that quick breaking down of the chemical, so your trip lasts for hours. So ayahuasca is just a multiple hours long version of a DMT trip, basically. And just because of that, inhibitor's been switched off. And the funny thing is, we in the West only discovered about MOA inhibitors in the 50s. They've been doing it for like a long time. In fact, they even claim King Solomon taught them how to do it on a visit to see the Incan king. The biblical King Solomon. Wow. I'm not even joking. That's where they claim they learned how to do it. Yeah.
We've had discussions too about like South America. They have so many tangible links to different gods all over the place, right? Like the Viracocha are very much like these giant Viking gods, right? They ride up on twin serpents. Man, picture a giant Viking ship with two giant dragon sails. I mean, it's almost easy to see when you hear the mythos laid out, how they would have seen these guys landing on the shore, these big serpent-headed boats and whatnot, and they describe them as, having golden beards and hair and da-da-da-da-da, right? Now, on the other side of South America, you have these other tales of people arriving on the shore at roughly the same time, groups of similar gods, but they're described slightly differently, right? But they all come and like alter their lives and then haul ass. And there's this like this common story. They come in, they teach them a few things, and then they just bolt. Hey, we have a war and we have to go, right? Now, not Viracocha, Tlaloc, right? His brother came. He came and helped the people and taught them many things, right? And then his brother comes and says, hey, we need you to come away for war. And he took him away. And then the people just continued living until eventually in the 1500s, the Spanish landed, chased them north, blah, blah, blah. Flus killed a lot of people, blase, blase. But this is it's a destructive cycle, though. And I think we've been since the very beginning, where these giant red-haired beings came in, there has been some form of eradication of even the information, not just them, right? But the information about them. They want to wipe the knowledge of them away, right? And I don't think they ever can, because spoken history will always exist, right? There are these, you could wipe it away in the city, or you can wipe it away in this culture. But with today's age, right, with technology, right, information is everywhere, right? Now, where 5 years ago, people had, or let's say before the internet, 25 years ago, people had a very limited scope of what they could see on TV and what they could go to the video store and rent. Now, all of these mythos and all of these histories and all of this is like in our face. And I really do think they're guiding us down this path. And everybody says, we feel this, something is going to happen. They're building up to something, and we don't know if it's World War III. We don't know if it's, this, that, or the other thing, but something big is going to happen. And I think people are just sensitive to these energies, right? And they've become so common now that people are tuned up to it, right? And where we've become uneasy. So my next question is, what are they building up to? You know, and this is what I want to see. Where is this going to go? You know,
what's the end game for the entire agenda?
And that's, are we just, and here's my theory on it, right? And I think this has happened cyclically throughout Earth, that they trick people into saying, okay, you know, this god is angered, now you have to help us build this giant monument. The people help them build this giant monument with, you know, wealth and labor and all kinds of different things, and they get this big monument built, and then the people that have it built go inside of it, lock the door, and a big flood happens and wipes everybody else out, right? I think they're just building storm shelters, and they're tricking humanity over and over into different ways to build these bunkers for themselves, right? Because it takes such a massive amount of wealth and energy and engineering and all these different things to build it. It's very nearly impossible for one person to do. So they have to crowdsource it, right? So what do when they know these cycles are coming again? They get people amped up. Oh yeah, donate to this, the global warming fund, or, you know, save the seals fund, or this, that, and the other thing. And they're funneling all this money into the Svalbard seed bank and all these different underground bunkers in different places. And certain people are going to live it out, and we're going to see the cycle happen again. And I think we're the little ages, if you will. I think we're coming back around to these little ages, these cycles.
Maybe.
And I think they know it, and they're just distracting us. And the more circus we see out there, the more they're trying to distract us. They're just flooding us with all of this nonsense to keep us looking. Hey, look over here, look over here, look over here, while they're doing their little thing over here. And then pretty soon they'll tuck themselves inside, close the doors, and we look around and go, hey, where'd all the rich people go? And then that's it.
Maybe it would explain why they're building these bunkers. They clearly think they have a hope of surviving something cataclysmic that's coming our way. To be honest, I've covered a lot of this endgame stuff on my channel, and if I was to explain to you now my view on this all, I need another 2-hour podcast. And I do a lot of podcasts talking about it as well, about the little season, and it's a brand new topic in conspiracy. It comes off the back of the Tartarian stuff, but it's the Christian take on it all. And if you want to talk about the end of the world, I can tell you a thing or two.
Or does it come from like the Incan calendar or the Aztec calendar? You know what I mean?
Well, you can go into the Kali Yugas and the cycles of India as well, and how we're in a certain age at the end of that cycle too, if you want to. But even then, they describe an epic war between a despotic king who convinces the whole earth to fight against a central king in the middle. And that is also the biblical narrative of the Gog-Magog war at the end of time, where the devil convinces the whole earth to make war with the camp of saints.
We'll save that for another show. It's definitely an interesting topic. I mean, you could even relate that to the war between the Aesir and Vanir, if you will.
Or the Ragnarok.
I mean, just any
the Great War at the end of time. You know, it's an epic tale, isn't it? And many people talk about it. You know,
and that's my specific belief as a Germanic pagan, is that these gods are our ancestors, right? I mean, like literally, they are our ancestors. We bottlenecked humanity in the last ice age, you know, and there was roughly at one point like somewhere between 12 and 40 people on Earth. This was the time of them, right? And that's where all of these tales come from. This is like, I think if you chase all of these back to their basis root, Stein, I shared a language tree. Is it possible to bring that up?
Yeah.
These different languages come back at certain points, and you can see where like these two share this mythos and these three share these, you know, this type of belief, but then they all run back down into Proto-Indo-European. And if you look at the dates they give on these languages in history, it's absolute bullshit, because it would indicate that roughly like 1,500 years ago, people were just babbling, right? And I mean, okay, I get the Tower of Babylon in the Bible and all of that, but I don't buy it. Even as tribes in Germania was separated tribes, you know, pre-Caesar time, or, you know, like year zero, we see Caesar writing that these tribes communicated with each other. They had federations and they would come together in wars. That means they could communicate, right? And they spoke a common tongue. So, I mean, the Greeks, we know they existed, you know, so far back in time, but you look at the dating that they put on like these linguistic trees, like just Germanic, right? It puts it like right at about the year 0. All right. Well, all these tribes existed year 0, but like Proto-Indo-European dating on it is like literally 500 years before. So you mean to tell me 500 years before, everybody that was speaking Russian, everybody that was speaking all of these different branch languages was speaking the same tongue? I'm just not buying that was 2,500 years ago. So like it's a really awkward history. If you look at all of those, basically all of these mythologies, these giants' tales, right, all have a root where they are all told from the same point. Now, I can't say that's Proto-Indo-European because the Native Americans also had it, because it's also in Australia, and they were there 70,000 years ago, right? 65,000 years ago. There's got to be a much deeper root to this, like pre-last ice age root. And this is where I get on to there was a civilization. There had to have been, right? Because you couldn't get all these common tales without it. You just
maybe, but again, I don't even know if I trust any of the historical records about timelines or how long the history has truly been, to be honest.
That's why I've started looking at the spoken histories.
Yeah.
And I am trusting the spoken histories because like you can look at the Aboriginal people and they have these tales, and then they're finding like archaeological evidence that validates this part of it, that was 12,000 years ago, and this part of it that was 15,000 years ago. And
the thing is that they may say 12,000 or 15,000, but it may not have been that long ago. I mean, what time do they have,
And I'll buy that. You know what I mean? Because even with our carbon dating and different sciences now, where I have a hard time is like when we can actually date the strata. You know what I mean? We know like how soil builds up in different areas and things like that. There's a lot better dating with that, like especially like younger dating, like tree ring dating, and like there's more precise forms. But the carbon dating I'll give you over a certain date, it's like they're pretty much just telling us what we want to hear.
Well, even in and is it dendrochronology you're talking about there with the trees? Yeah. It seems like in the year 536, based on the tree rings, there was an ice age.
We a mini ice age. The Dark Ages.
Something happened that was horrible.
We know the sun. We know the sun went out for 2 years because of two volcanic eruptions. Mm-hmm. Technically, 3 volcanic eruptions that happened at 2 different times. 2 of them went off simultaneously, and then another one like 2 years later, and it just kind of like that was it.
But the thing is, that would likely bottleneck an entire civilization and culture of people. Without food growing, how long would it take before people starve to death and die?
I'm quite a fan of the Tartaria theory. I think it's incredibly interesting, and you can link so many things to it. And one is timeline deception, that somehow some group has added 1,000 years to our timeline, and the proof, quote unquote, would be that on like pretty old buildings. I know that in my hometown you have a couple of buildings like that. Like for example, 1528 would be written down as J528 or I528, and they just tell us, oh no, that's a 1. I mean, that's clearly not a 1. Like the I and the J both are in my freaking name. I know what they look like.
On coins as well. Same thing on coins. The date these coins. And there's much we can speculate on what all that's about. But guys, I'm gonna have to get going soon. We're going over 2 hours here.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I'm it's a little past midnight here. You're an hour behind me, but
time where I am.
This has been incredibly interesting. A lot of food for thought, a lot of things that need further investigating, and I guess a good start would be by buying your book. So where may the people find that?
Yeah, so if you want the visuals for a lot of things I'm talking about, this really is a visual topic, and you want to hear a lot more detail, because I've just given you a very brief overview. We haven't even touched on quite a lot of things, to be honest. Go to my YouTube channel, go to the playlist section, and go to the Nephilim-clowns, and you'll see a lot of my research is laid out there over the past 8 years. I have published the first book, The Nephilim-clowns, Volume 1, The History. This explains where Nephilim come from, why they had the features they had, and it goes into secret societies, their connection to creating the costume. A lot of the stuff we covered today is in this book. Volume 2 is going to be called The Now, and it's going to be all about the modern day music industry, the arts industry, the cultures all around the earth who dress this way to channel their ancestors, all that kind of stuff. I do briefly touch on that at the end of the book by focusing on the Heyoka and the American traditions of the sacred clowns. But again, we need to talk about that today. This goes way deeper than I've just said today. So go to YouTube primarily to watch the videos on these things. But you can go to Amazon and type in the Nephilim look like clowns, and you can get the book as well in paperback or hardback. And I should hopefully have the Kindle version released tomorrow. It's in review right now. It should have been released 2 days ago, and they've delayed it. Hopefully tomorrow it'll go live. So you can get the book on Amazon, or you can just follow me at Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube.
Awesome. I will make sure to put all the links in the description box down below. I have watched some of your videos, of course some of your stuff on Instagram as well. The Nephilim looked like clowns. It is a absolutely fascinating topic. Quite scary, but fascinating. So thank you very much for coming on, Josh. Thank you for co-hosting on this one. Couldn't do it without my tribal brother, of course.
Understanding Conspiracy. What is your name again, sir?
It's Paul Stobbs.
Paul.
Right, guys, thanks for having me. I'll stay in touch. We can do this again sometime, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes,
I'm just gonna wrap it up here. If you have to go, you can go. I'll just do the last bit of plugging.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, guys. Take it easy.
Okay.
Have a good one, man.
Yeah, this was incredible.
Yes.
Josh, any last words, man?
That tied a lot of things together that I didn't expect it to tie into. I knew it was a deeply rooted topic, but I didn't catch the Masonic, things. I mean, I've heard Nick briefly talking about it, but I didn't understand how deep that went. It's Club of Rome level, Rockefeller Foundation kind of stuff. That's all. It's all scary, man. It's all scary.
Top down, through the dimensions, through the worlds. It's
a war against your mind.
It's everything. It's quite literally everything.
It's a war against your mind. Learn how to break away from it, man.
Spiritual warfare at its finest, for fucking sure. So if you want to help battle these demons, if you want to have a good tribe, have a good place to find like-minded people, to do deeper research, to broaden your understanding, broaden your knowledge, elevate yourself, and not just in the way that Josh likes to do, come join us at the Tribe of the Greyhorn Pagans, or better yet, come join us at the Grove of Odin. You can find all the information for both the Greyhorn Pagans and the Grove of Odin. It is similar. Well, it's the same entity, just one is legal, one is more private. All of that information is available on our website, www.greyhornpagans.com, where you can also find the podcast. Of course, you can find all of the Substacks that we do, everything that we write, the books that we have written, Etsy shops, you name it. Just go to our website, www.greyhornpagans.com. Everything is on there. This has been an amazing show. I am very happy to have had Paul on.
Absolutely. Very knowledgeable guy.
44 videos in this playlist, right?
Very knowledgeable guy, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
Anybody that can write a book on a topic has definitely done some reading on that topic and can talk to you about it for a while. And he is no exception to that rule.
Well, and of course, lastly, if you liked what you saw, minus the scary motherfucker right here above me, if you liked what you heard, do not forget to like, share, subscribe. Do the same thing on the audio platforms. If you want to listen or view this podcast a week early, subscribe to our Patreon. That is patreon.com/Greyhorn Pagans. We have many different tiers with many different benefits, of course. I think that's about it. Just like, share, subscribe.
Check out the new Grove of Odin Substack.
Yes, definitely do that. Also, of course, can be found on our website, www.greyhornpagans.com. I have linked it on the homepage, like the very first page. So you don't even have to go far. Just go to our website, click on the link, and join us.
Keep your ancestral traditions alive.
Hell yeah. And on that note, I am going to end it here. Thank you all, and we will see you soon. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
This was yet another amazing episode of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. We thank you all for watching. We thank you all for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified whenever we upload something new. Support us on Patreon for early access and for everything else that we do with the tribe, for everything else that we do with the podcast. Find us on www.greyhornpagans.com. For now, we thank you.